Nnamdi Kanu's trial has reached a critical point as the world eagerly anticipates the final judgment by Justice James Omotosho. With all eyes on the court, the possible outcomes of this trial are of significant interest. This case has been marred by legal complexities, political tensions, and the weight of its implications not only for the accused, but for the larger issues of national security and justice in Nigeria. The federal government has stood firm, asserting that Kanu's actions amount to terrorism, while his defense has questioned the legitimacy of the charges, arguing that the law itself is outdated and that the court lacks jurisdiction. As the court prepares to deliver its judgment, the question remains, what will happen next? The outcome of this trial is far from clear, but we can explore some possible scenarios that may unfold when the judgment is handed down. First, there is the possibility that the judge will deliver a conviction, confirming that the charges against Kanu were valid and supported by sufficient evidence. This would be seen as a major victory for the Nigerian government in its ongoing battle against separatist movements. A conviction would likely lead to a sentencing phase where Kanu could face significant prison time. This would be a serious blow to his supporters, particularly those in the southeastern regions of Nigeria, who have rallied around the call for an independent Biafran state. The fallout from such a conviction could lead to increased unrest in the region, with protests and demonstrations likely to follow. Kanu's supporters have already voiced their displeasure with the trial, arguing that it is politically motivated and aimed at silencing opposition to the current administration. If the judgment results in a conviction, expect a heated reaction across the country, especially within the ranks of IPOB and its supporters, who view this case as more than just a legal battle. It is seen as a fight for the very survival of their cause. However, there is also the possibility that the court may find flaws in the charge or the way the case was handled. Kanu's defense has been vocal about the lack of proper legal basis for the charges, arguing that the law under which he is being tried has been repealed and that the court lacks the jurisdiction to hear the case. If the judge agrees with this argument, it could result in the charges being dismissed, or at the very least, significantly reduced. This would be a major blow to the prosecution, as it would call into question the entire legal framework used to try Kanu. A dismissal or reduction of the charges would likely be hailed as a victory for Kanu and his legal team, as it would mean that they succeeded in proving that the case against him was fundamentally flawed. It would also spark a wider conversation about the powers of the court, the legitimacy of the charges, and the possibility that others facing similar charges could use this case as a precedent for their own defense. This outcome would put pressure on the Nigerian government to reassess its stance on separatist movements and to reconsider its approach to the issue of national security. There may also be cause for the government to shift its focus from the prosecution of Kanu to addressing the underlying grievances that have led to the rise of IPOB and other groups advocating for Biafran independence. Alternatively, the court may decide to take a more cautious approach, delivering a mixed verdict that neither fully convicts nor dismisses the case outright. In this scenario, the judge could deliver a partial ruling, acknowledging some of the charges while dismissing others. This would result in an outcome that leaves many questions unanswered and would likely prolong the legal proceedings. Such a decision could delay the final resolution of the case, leading to continued uncertainty for both Kanu and his supporters. It could also give rise to further legal battles, as Kanu and his team may choose to appeal the parts of the judgment that they feel are unjust. This kind of mixed decision would likely create a sense of frustration on both sides, with neither the prosecution nor the defense fully satisfied with the outcome. In some ways, it might prolong the political and legal turmoil surrounding Kanu, as the case could continue to reverberate through the media and in public discourse for months, if not years, to come. While these are the primary possible outcomes, there are other factors to consider that could influence the judgment. Kanu's decision to represent himself in court has been a highly contentious issue. It has raised questions about the fairness of the trial and the rights of the accused to mount a defense in a way that is consistent with the principles of justice. The court has already warned Kanu that his self-representation could lead to his defense being dismissed if it is not properly executed. The judge has also expressed concerns about Kanu's ability to navigate the complexities of the legal process without the assistance of trained legal professionals. This puts Kanu in a difficult position, as he must rely on his understanding of the law and his ability to argue his case effectively. While his decision to represent himself is seen by some as an act of defiance, it could also be a strategic move to control the narrative and avoid relying on lawyers who might not share his vision. However, if his defense is deemed inadequate or legally insufficient, the court may rule against him, leading to a conviction regardless of the weaknesses in the charges. As the judgment date approaches, the political climate in Nigeria has become more charged. Supporters of Kanu have expressed their concerns about the fairness of the trial and the possibility of a biased decision. They argue that Kanu is being persecuted for his political views and his advocacy for Biafran independence rather than for any legitimate legal violations. They point to the larger issues of human rights and self-determination, asserting that Kanu's trial is a reflection of the government's unwillingness to tolerate dissent. On the other hand, the Nigerian government has maintained that Kanu's actions constitute a serious threat to national security and that his actions have led to violence and instability in the southeastern part of the country. The government argues that Kanu's separatist rhetoric has incited unrest and that he must be held accountable for the harm his movement has caused. The trial has become a symbol of the broader struggle between the government and those advocating for greater autonomy in the southeastern region, making it a highly sensitive issue for both sides. No matter the outcome, the judgment in Nnamdi Kanu's case will have far-reaching consequences for the political and legal landscape of Nigeria. It will likely serve as a precedent for future cases involving separatist movements and the prosecution of individuals accused of terrorism. It will also test the strength of Nigeria's judicial system and its ability to handle high-profile cases that are politically charged. For now, all eyes are on Justice Omotosho, and the outcome of this trial will be watched closely by Nigerians, the international community, and political analysts alike. The trial has already had a significant impact on the political discourse in Nigeria, and the final judgment is sure to shape the direction of the country's approach to issues of separatism, nationalism, and the rule of law. As the date approaches, the tension is palpable and the future of Nnamdi Kanu and the IPOB movement hangs in the balance. People are watching closely because it's not just about Nnamdi Kanu. It's about the broader implications for justice, human rights, and the treatment of political prisoners across Africa and beyond. The world is increasingly aware of the political dynamics at play here, how the courts and the government are navigating the complexities of a separatist movement that continues to grow in influence and support. Now, let's take a moment to look deeper into what Kanu's case says about the Nigerian judicial system. Regardless of how this trial ends, we have to consider the pressures and the political climate surrounding the court's role. For the judges involved, the pressure to deliver a fair and unbiased verdict must be immense, especially in a case as high-profile as this. The level of scrutiny thereunder from both domestic and international sources cannot be overstated. With every ruling, with every piece of evidence, the court's credibility is on the line. This is not just about Kanu's guilt or innocence, it's about the integrity of the entire legal system. And we all know that when the political stakes are this high, legal decisions can become much more complicated. It's one thing to uphold the law, but another thing entirely when political considerations play a role in the judicial process. The question we should be asking is, can the court remain impartial under such intense public and political pressure? What happens when the judicial system faces such a strong push from both the government and Kanu's supporters? We've seen similar situations play out in other parts of the world where trial becomes symbolic of a larger ideological battle. It's about more than the individuals involved. It's about the system that's trying to deal with these conflicts. And with the ruling coming soon, we have to think about the ripple effects. What happens next? especially if the judgment doesn't satisfy one side or the other? For those supporting Kanu,
they'll undoubtedly argue that this trial is more about silencing a voice for independence than seeking justice. His movement, IPOB, has been pushing for a referendum on Biafran independence for years, and many of Kanu's supporters believe that he is being persecuted because of his outspoken advocacy for the self-determination of his people. This sentiment is prevalent in parts of southeastern Nigeria, where calls for an independent Biafra have gained traction in recent years. The people there feel marginalized by the central government, and Kanu has become a symbol of their struggle. If the court decides to convict him, it would likely intensify feelings of resentment and anger, not just in the southeast, but potentially across the country. On the flip side, the government argues that Kanu's actions and his inflammatory rhetoric have contributed to violence and instability in the region. They claim that his calls for secession have incited attacks on both security forces and civilians, leading to significant loss of life and property. From the government's perspective, Kanu represents a threat to the unity and security of the nation, and holding him accountable is seen as essential for maintaining peace. The question for them is not whether Kanu's rights should be respected, but whether his actions have gone too far in challenging the integrity of the state. In this context, the decision could go beyond Kanu himself. It could set a precedent for how future cases involving separatist movements are handled in Nigeria. If Kanu is convicted, it could send a strong message to other groups advocating for independence or autonomy that the state will not tolerate actions that challenge the nation's unity. But if he is acquitted, it could embolden these groups, and we could see an uptick in similar movements across the country. But let's not ignore the impact this case has on the average Nigerian. For many, this trial is more than just about law or politics. It's about what it means to live in a society where one man can become the face of national division. It's about what it means to live in a country where the tensions between ethnic groups, political ideologies, and security forces are at a boiling point. The stakes are high because for ordinary Nigerians, the outcome of this trial could either calm the nation or send it further down the path of division and instability. The people watching this case aren't just watching a man in court, they're watching the very soul of their country being tested. So, as we move closer to November 20th, it's essential to ask ourselves, what does justice really mean in this context? Is it about enforcing the law? Is it about ensuring peace and stability? Or is it about protecting the rights of individuals, even when those individuals challenge the established order? The answer isn't simple, and it's going to take time to fully understand the impact of whatever decision is made. As we continue to watch this story unfold, it's important to stay informed, stay calm, and keep seeking the truth. The fate of Nnamdi Kanu may be decided soon, but the larger questions it raises about justice, national security, and self-determination will remain relevant long after the judgment is delivered. If you've enjoyed this breakdown, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next updates. What do you think will happen in Kanu's case? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's discuss it. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.